If you've surpassed food, water, shelter, space as a need for your money, then you are still in survival mode, but it's because you still believe that money is going to make you better in some way, and it's usually in some sort of comparative way. So you have to do the work once you have food, water, shelter, space. If you can say, I have a bed to sleep in tonight, I have water and food available to me, I won't go hungry for the next several days, and I have a roof over my head. If you can say those three things, now it's time to do the work of trying to figure out what will actually bring you happiness. Because once you do that, then you'll know the point at which money is no longer the answer, and you have to find other means to find a better level of fulfillment. Live and in person, but virtually. Good to see you guys. It is Coach Woody here from Next Better with my awesome co-host, Kristin. Kristin, how the heck are you?
Doing pretty all right. As we just talked about, I'm doing no caffeine this week, so feeling stable but a little tired. But yeah.
Absolutely. I love it. Good for you. It's good to test those things and see how we feel. I find a lot of people, they get nervous about testing things like no caffeine, no
Mm,
gluten, no whatever. Just try it
right.
out a little bit, right? And the big thing is seeing how you feel in the moment, being aware of that. Because some people might say, no caffeine for 3 days. Well, I felt horrible. It's like, yeah, you felt horrible for 3 days, but like, did anything happen that was a
Right.
benefit? So kudos to you. Let me know how that goes.
Yeah, we'll do. We'll do.
Awesome. We're talking about materialism today. Money, 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 and all the things that come with it. And before we get started, as always, just a little context from the reason this conversation exists to begin with is well, I'll take it way back. So as most people know who are listening by now, I created a model for well-being. And in that model, there are 8 different areas for our wellness, and there's a lot of different models out there for well-being. One that I really appreciate is the 8 Dimensions of Wellness by Peggy Swarbrick. But a lot of those models have what is called financial wellness associated with it, and it's this idea of, do you have enough money to improve your quality of life? And what I found through my research is that a lot of times money is really just a part of the conversation. Really, what money is it's an exchange of value where I have given you time and skill, and in return, you have given me money. That's a typical job, 9 to 5, right? And that's a very kind of simplified version of it. But ultimately, that's kind of what it is. And that money is a representation of my time and skill and the value that I brought. And in return, I can trade that representation of value for something else. Typically, that's where money brings its value, is we use that money to buy the things that we need or we want: food, water, shelter, space, experiences, those types of things. And so what I found was it kind of misses the boat when we just talk about financial wellness, because if money is designed to help us buy the things that we need, shouldn't we really consider more this idea of, do we have enough things that we need and that we want to live our quality of life? If money is just the conduit where we go from trading our time to getting the things that we want, why not focus on that? A really good example I give people, it's a little bit of an extreme, but I think it hits the point, is if you talk to somebody who lives up in Alaska, off the grid, they farm, they hunt, they do all the things, they could care, you know, very little about money, but they do need material wellness. They do need food, water, shelter, space. A lot of people argue love is another thing that we need, but money allows us to buy those things. Not love necessarily, but all the other things. And so my model really kind of leans into that philosophy of material wellness is what we need in order to be able to live a sound quality of life. And if money is what you need to do that, if you live in a culture or you live in a place where you need money to survive, then great. Then talk about financial wellness if you would like. But I also really want people to lean into this idea of, okay, stress, there's so much stress about money. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that today with the wonderful questions that you have. But if we remember that money is just a tool that allows us to do good things and help the people around us and to buy the things that we need in order to survive, then really we can start to take a step back and ask ourselves, well, do I already have a lot of those things? Because if you have if you have a roof over your head, if you have water in your cup, then you're doing pretty well. If you didn't have to go very far to get those things, you're doing very well. If those things got delivered to you by another human, you're doing extremely well. Or you are spending money you don't have, and that's another topic of the conversation. But those are the things that I want people to remember as we're talking about this conversation of material wellness, which is, do I have the things that I need and I want? And if not, then I need more money to do that. And then if I do, maybe money isn't the answer to my overall well-being. And so that's really just kind of what I wanted to preface this conversation with. I know there's going to be some excitement around it. I know as people listen in, there's going to be some boats maybe rocked, because that's one of the reasons I said materialism being a good thing, because it can be when we use it in the right context, and we use the intention of what that money is and what we do with it. That's when we can really focus in on materialism being a positive aspect of our lives. So with that setup, let's get into it. Let's get those questions rolling.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know this AMA show is kind of related to the previous podcast host that you just had on, Lloyd Ross. And I
Yes,
listened to that. It was a great conversation. What was like the main thing you took away from it that you learned?
I love that. It was more than not. It was really just a reinforcement of some of the things
Mm.
that I already learned. I learned that it's okay to use some contentious titles for your book if you're using them in an intentional way. And that's really more about what this conversation is. Money is okay if you're using it for good reasons. It can also be bad if you're using it for bad reasons. His books, which are titled Money Grows on Trees and Money Buys Happiness, the exact opposite of what we think of money, get your attention one way or the other, whether you hate it or you like it. But if you're willing to give it a chance, you're going to read it and recognize, oh, okay, I understand what he's saying. Money buys happiness really means money is a tool that allows me to get the needs that I have. And to a certain point, I believe it's 70 or 75,000. It depends on where you live, right? But up to a certain point, money, like you got to have more money to improve your quality of life. Again, food, water, shelter, space at the base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But after that point, it doesn't necessarily do much. Over 400,000, which for a lot of people listening, that's whatever. That's, not even in the realm of the conversation. But over that, there's absolutely no change. I can buy a bigger yacht, right? Like, like that's
Yeah.
whatever the conversation you want to have about it. But up to 75,000 or 80, it does buy you more happiness because it buys you better quality of life, however you want to define happiness in those terms. And so those books give you a really good indication of like that title being catchy so that you understand like, oh, money can be used for good. So that was something that I took from it. Another was a reinforcement of this idea that when it comes to success, a lot of people look at successful people and go, oh, they got so much to be grateful for. Look how successful they are. I'm not grateful yet because I don't have that success. And it's almost the exact opposite. In fact, it is the exact opposite in my mind, that in order to become that successful, you first have to start with a level of gratitude, right? We talked about Gary Vaynerchuk saying, Lloyd shared this, and I've heard him before. If you can't be grateful for a cup of coffee, you're not going to be grateful for the Rolex or the yacht. And that's just true. If you're not a grateful person, that's a mindset, not a state of being. And so the same with this idea between being poor and being broke, or being wealthy versus being rich, right? Being poor is a mindset. Being broke is a state, right? Like, I'm broke. I don't have any money. That doesn't mean you're poor. Being poor is more of a mindset. And people could argue semantics all day long, but at the end of the day, that's how I view it. And then the same with wealth versus rich. Rich people go out and they buy all this stuff to try to impress their friends, or people that typically they don't even care about, but they're trying to play a status game. And that's what Lloyd Ross talked a lot about in the podcast. And I highly recommend anybody listening to go check that out. But being wealthy means you have money, right? When you spend money, like when you're rich and you spend money, you're actually reducing your wealth. Wealth is having money, not spending money. And so that was a reinforcement that I had as well, is that these mind states are really important. Lloyd talks a little bit too about this idea of being ready for wealth. Like when people hit the lottery, a lot of them are not ready for that success. They haven't built the capacity for it. And so they end up having the same habits that they did before the lottery. And therefore they go broke again. Right. And so that's that piece that it really got reinforced, and that's really what a lot of this is about, is just reinforcement of these ideas. Mindset about money is a huge factor when it comes to your material well-being.
Yeah, and all about how responsible you are with it, how you handle it, even when it is, yeah, that's less. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense. How much do our early beliefs about money, like family or culture, upbringing, shape our adult well-being and on like an abundant or scarce view of money?
A huge factor, right? So I tell a story a lot to my clients because I'm a coach, as most people know. And when I'm talking to people, a lot of times at some point they'll go, man, this is like therapy. And so then I have to kind of explain what that is, both for legal purposes and, and because I want them to understand the difference, right? Therapy goes into your past and starts to dig up the emotions and the things that happen to you that may cause you to be like you are now, but it helps to reconcile those issues in the past. Coaching tries to determine how we can use those mindsets and change those limiting beliefs to help you optimize your future. I may need to know some things about you in the past in order to better understand how you act now so that I can help you optimize your future, but I'm not interested in quote unquote fixing your past. That is something a therapist is really good at, and I think it takes both ventures in order to be able to benefit you. This is the same thing I'm talking about here, right? So does the aspect of your life in the past cause you to have scarcity, limiting mindsets around money and material wellness? 100%. 100%. In my past, wealthy people were considered evil. They were negative. They picked on the little man. They were constantly doing what was best for them. They didn't give anybody a seat at the table. Like if you were wealthy, you were a bad person. And the question isn't whether or not your past affects your mentality today around wealth, or for that matter, relationships or physical health or any of those things. To me, what the question is what are you going to do to change your mindsets so that you can reach the level of success that you want? And I really want to hammer that home, the level of success that you want. If you want to start $1 million company, but you're afraid that being wealthy will change you, you will not hit that number. You just won't. You have to change your mindset around what wealthy looks like. And so you get to decide what material wellness looks like for you. There are people that live in grass huts or cabins out in the middle of the woods, and they farm and they hunt and they're living their best lives. I'm so happy for them. That's so awesome. That's not what my life looks like in terms of success, because I want to impact people and I want to help people and I want to design programs and systems and processes that help them find purpose and then fulfill it so they can contribute meaningfully to the world. And I can't do that in a hut in the middle of the woods. Some days I wish I lived there, but ultimately I can't do that. And I need resources to be able to do that. Now, some of those resources are people, networks, connections, skill sets, and some of those resources are financial. And so the limiting beliefs that you have from your past are there. My suggestion, find somebody who you can work with, a coach, a therapist, somebody to uncover those things, because they are there. No matter what you want to believe, they are there, unless you are just drastically successful now in some way, in which case there's probably a limiting belief holding you back from some other level of success. And then unpack those things so that you can overcome them or come to terms with them, whatever you like. I prefer to optimize, not just overcome, because
Yeah.
overcoming is just one step. Then it's how do we start to optimize these things for the future? So whether it's material wellness or physical wellness, social wellness, environmental wellness, mental wellness, whatever those things may be, yes, there are things about your past that have helped shape who you are. And it may be somebody else's. We talked about this with Lloyd. It may be somebody else's fault that you're the way that you are, your parents, society, a weird uncle, whatever. But it's your responsibility to do something about it. And that's what matters the most. Is, are you willing to take responsibility to change or to accept where you are and be grateful for it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
And one main thing I took away from listening to your recent podcast with Lloyd was that the idea of money can buy happiness on the condition that you are intentional with how you use it. And it really seems to come down to how it affects our perceived quality of life. So, on that note, how do you define quality of life and where do you see money fitting into that equation?
Yeah. One of my favorite answers to most questions that my students hate is it depends.
Uh,
But the reason I say that and the reason I believe so strongly in it is I'm not, as a coach and as a human, as a fellow human, it's not my decision on what matters to you. The best coaches recognize that my clients already have all the answers within them. It's my job to help them unpack them, to uncover them, to clear away all the junk that is limiting mindsets and beliefs, and help them see a path forward. Sometimes that's a lot of work. Sometimes it's a little nudge, but ultimately that's my job. And so it's not my job to tell you what your quality of life is. It's my job to help you figure out what that is and then figure out a path to get there. Some of my clients, I help them do less, a lot less, like let go of this idea that if they get this title or this job, that all of a sudden they're going to feel like they're successful. Or some of my clients, it's, I got to strip away all this junk that doesn't matter that I've just accumulated over the years in terms of roles, responsibilities, being on this board or this committee or whatever. I got to get rid of that to give myself the space to do stuff that really, really matters to me. And at the beginning, it's going to hurt because change hurts. I got to say no to people. I got to do all these things. I got to redefine the identity that I have made for myself. It will be painful. Change is hard. But at the end of that process, you are going to be so much more intentional about the decisions that you make. And what that really means in all of that, that aligns with quality of life, is when you know what's important to you, when you know what fulfills you and what matters, then that's when you can start to say, this decision does or does not affect the improvement of my quality of life. Now, with all of those things being said, there are certain standards that we as humans recognize, improve, play a big part in our quality of life. Obviously, physical health is a big part. We understand that 120/80 to a degree is a healthy blood pressure. We understand that cholesterol levels can negatively or positively impact our heart health. We understand that muscles atrophy or get weaker over the years due to a process called sarcopenia, which is the age-related muscle loss, right? So we understand all of those things can benefit our quality of life. So there is a certain standard, right? Like access to clean water, right? One of my first suggestions to all of my clients is drinking more water. Why? Because there's no human on this earth that couldn't be benefited from a little bit more water unless they're doing the whole trying to chug 5 gallons a day kind of thing, right? In which case you can die from that. But very rarely are people drinking too much water, right? So there's certain standards that just will improve your quality of life. And again, food, water, shelter, space. Abraham Maslow figured that out a long, long time ago, and love. And so the social piece is also a big part of it. We understand Robert Waldinger in The Good Life. Where's that book at for the people watching? Where do you go? Oh, there it is. So this is a phenomenal book that talks about, they did a study started in 1938, still going on to this day. So a longitudinal study of what makes people happy, basically. And they found that I'm going to spoil it for everybody, the number one predictor of happiness over how much money you made, what kind of car you drove, what your status was, what your title was. None of that mattered as compared to the people that were in your life and the depth of your relationships. And it wasn't just about how many, it was about how deep and how much you could trust them. Phenomenal book. Definitely read it. Like if you want to know whether or not you're going to have a meaningful life at the end of it all, this book tells you what everybody else said, because the only other option is you wait till the end of your life and hope, or you can read about it and determine if you're on the right path, right? But we know that relationships matter. And so there's all these different things that I could tell you. In general, humans believe this will be a benefit to the quality of life. But that ties really strongly back into this concept of money, which is up to a certain point, money will, quote unquote, buy you happiness because it's going to buy those essential needs that you have. But once you hit a certain point, you start to play other games with money because you think that's what gives you happiness. You start to buy the car that you don't even like just because you think it's going to make somebody else feel something about you. But that's when you start to tie your validation as a human to external factors like what people think of you. And you use money as a means by which to try to make people feel a certain way about you. And the trouble is that never goes well. We talked about this in the podcast. People, no matter what, at some point when you're playing a status game, you will lose. Somebody has a bigger boat, bigger car, bigger house, whatever. And so there will always be somebody in physical wellness. Somebody will always be bigger, stronger, faster than you. And even when you get to the peak, I use the example of basketball. Anybody listening that likes sports, I'm going to name the top number one basketball player of all time. You ready? It doesn't matter what I say because you've already painted a picture in your head of who that is and started the argument in your head about why I'm wrong, right? Because as soon as you start to have that conversation, it's MJ, it's LeBron James, it's Kobe Bryant, right? There's all these different names that pop up. And when you say, well, it's all about how many rings you have. Well, no, it's all about your stats. No, it's all about the way you played the game. It's like, we just changed the definition of what success looks like when you get to the top, right? And so that's why status games don't work. Even when you get to the top, if you're doing it to impress other people, they will disappoint you because they're going to tell you all the reasons why you're still not the best, because that the external validation piece is not a winning game. So if you get to a point where your quality of life has been equalized due to having enough money for your basic needs, and you start using that money for intentions that are not around what I believe your directional well-being, which is what's your purpose in life and what are the values you live by. If you don't know that, you start spending money just based off what society says success looks like, right? I want a nicer looking body. I want a faster car. I want a mansion. I want to have a business that looks successful, right? So you start spending money around these things. And that does not improve your quality of life because, again, you're looking for validation. You're using money to find validation from an external source that has no idea what you actually care about. Now, if you like fast cars, buy the damn fast car. If you fixed up old hot rods with your dad growing up and that brings you joy and fulfillment, then do it. If you want a bigger house because you love to entertain people and have people over and build this sense of camaraderie and love, and just you love to host people and that brings you a sense of fulfillment, buy the bigger house. But do it in a way that does not decrease your ability to afford the other things you need, and do it because it's what you want to do, not because society is pressuring you into a belief that that's going to make you happy. You got to know what you believe is a good quality of life first.
Do you think people overestimate how much money will change their day-to-day emotions?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think that's a phenomenal question. I think what it is, there's a couple of nuances to that, right? There's what Arthur Brooks calls the hedonic treadmill, which is this idea of like we're always looking for more and more and more and more pleasure. And as soon as we get pleasure, we get more of it. And there are pros and cons to that. One of my favorite quotes is, no matter how flat you make a pancake, there's always two sides. And so the negative side to that is, evolutionarily, we needed to strive for something, because if we found a patch of blueberries and just said, all right, we're set, right, that patch of blueberries is going to go away. Our need to eat does not. So striving for the next thing has been beneficial to us. The challenge becomes when we move the goalpost every time we reach a metric of success. So a lot of my high achievers, they set success for themselves, right? I'm going to make my first million. Well, once you hit that level of success, if the goal was 1 million, well, now the only way to determine more success is to make more money. And I get that all the time, right? More is better. No, more is not better. Better is better, but you have to understand the definition of better. And so we move the goalpost every time we reach the metric. And therefore, when have we ever succeeded? Rarely, if ever. Because trust me, when you hit $999,999, that one more dollar isn't going to it's going to feel good for like 10 seconds. Right. And then you're just going to be like, well, what's next now? I see this all the time in myself when I do races, right? Like I'm training for lowest to highest right now. So we started Badwater Basin in Death Valley, which is the lowest point in the United States. And then I'm going to go up to Mount Whitney, which is the highest point in the contiguous in the United States. And so it's like one venture. It's going to take me 4 or 5 days to do it, right? The challenge is I'm going to train for months. I'm going to do that in 4 or 5 days. I'm going to stand on the summit of Mount Whitney for 30 minutes, maybe, depends on how cold my ass gets. Then I'm gonna turn around, I'm gonna come down. And immediately, I already sense it a little bit in my bones. I'm gonna be like, right? And so if we're constantly looking for that next thing to bring us happiness, we will never fulfill it. Ironically, so my logo right above my head, I'm pointing to it, Kristin. Have I ever told you the story of my logo?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
right. So I'll give the shortened version for the people who are listening. Right. The reason my logo, and if you've never seen it, it's a series of consecutively higher mountains, and there's a sun above it. And so the mountains kind of never end. It kind of gives this illusion of like they always keep going, right? And they kind of go up and down, and there's a trend line above it. And the idea there is that our goal is to be successful. It's to end at a higher point than we started. But it's going to have some ebbs and flows. It's going to dip a little bit. We're going to go through valleys, and life happens. But the reason it never ends is because our success, our drive, our motivation should never end, right? Until we die, in which case, hopefully, the goal would be that we've left the world better than we found it, right? But the problem is if all you're constantly doing is striving to the next peak, the only place you're looking down is at your feet. And hey, guess what? Every step sucks. It sucks as bad as the last step, right? And so you never see any level of improvement. And so the sun is actually one of the most important aspects of that entire logo, because what the sun does is it reminds us every once in a while we need to turn around on that climb of the mountain, have the sun on our face, and enjoy the view of all that we've done. Because if we haven't taken the time to enjoy that journey, then we're constantly just in a state of not succeeding. And that's a miserable place to be. And so to your original question of do people get an over glorification of money bringing them happiness? 100%, because we don't know what it feels like until we have it. And then as soon as we have it, we're constantly pushing that goalpost to, well, yeah, now I have, $1,000 in my emergency fund, but now I need 5,000 or else I'm not successful. Well, now, I got the car, but Jim over there, he's got a better car. It's faster, blah, blah, blah. And that's where the whole point of gratitude comes in. And I get it. There's a lot of people out there that are starving. There's a lot of people out there that don't have, 2 nickels to rub together. And so I implore them to help them get out of that scarcity mindset, recognize what you do have, because that's, again, you have to get out of a scarcity mindset first. You have to believe that there's hope, that you can improve yourself. And once you do that, then you start to think through what are the steps, right? Where do I want my life to be in 5 years? To give yourself a little hope and a little vision, a little direction. What's the first step today? What's what I call the next better step that's going to help me get closer to what that looks like? And then you just focus on that. And it all has to pay out to what is it that I hope to accomplish. So for me, I believe that we should have big, hairy, audacious goals in all 8 categories of our life. And so for me, material wellness is I want to start an endowment that lives in perpetuity once I die, that helps people focus on their mental well-being and also their overall well-being. It'd be starting in the mental well-being, because I just think that's a space right now that we really are struggling with. And I don't think AI is going to help. If anybody's curious, they can listen to our last show, right? AI's impact on humanity's search for meaning. But that's what I want. That's my big, hairy, audacious goal for material well-being. It's not for me. I want to make millions of dollars. I want to make $1 billion, but I want to do it so that I can pour it into that. And that is the purpose of my life, manifested in material well-being. And because of that, when I get money, it's not really about me. It's not about validating who I am as a person. It's not about comparing myself to others. And hey, guys, don't get me wrong. I still struggle with that sometimes. I still struggle with seeing other coaches doing well and going, man, why am I not that successful? So it's a human thing. There's evolutionary aspects to it. But ultimately, I try to keep that big picture in mind so that I have the opportunity to be more servant-hearted focusing on serving others and abundant minded so that I can continue to strive and grow, because otherwise I'll just give up.
I think it's interesting too. Evolutionarily speaking, we are rewarded by caring for people. Obviously, it takes like well over a decade to take care of a child and help it grow too. So that sense of connection is incredibly important too for a good sense of well-being in life in general.
Absolutely, yeah. If we were snakes, none of this would matter. I'm like, because not so much the emotional side or like the intellectual side, but just they're not designed evolutionarily to care for each other. They lay eggs, they leave, and hey, guess what? That snake pops out, and he's a snake. He knows how to do all the snake things. He knows how to find food. He knows how to care for himself. He knows how to sun. He knows how to find water. You don't need nobody. So they haven't evolved to have any social connection. So as a species, like, we evolved to have social connections. Why do we compare ourselves to each other? Because if we act out, if we are not valuable to the society that we live in, guess what? They ostracize you. They kick you out. And what happened to us back in the day when we were evolutionary wiring our brains for societal constructs? If you got kicked out of the commune, bye-bye. You're dead. Yeah. So survival was based off of our ability to connect with other humans and bring value. So why do I compare myself with other coaches? Because what if I'm not valuable enough? What if people don't think that I bring something to the table? What if I'm not as good as all of them? Will they kick me out? Will I be ostracized? Will I be pushed out? Those are real conversations. The problem is that no longer do we live in communities. We should go back to it, to be honest, and there's more to that conversation at a later date. But we don't live in those communities anymore where we're the cobblers or we're the blacksmiths or we're the hunters or the gatherers. And so we no longer need that validation. We bring value, but we're still not getting that validation in ways that matter. Like, I give you the shoe, you give me a thank you, and you trade me some fur or whatever, right? That validation's not happening. And so we're constantly in this fearful mode of what if I'm not enough? What if I'm not doing enough? What if I don't have enough? And so, which, by the way, to everybody listening, one of my shields to that, I have a mantra, and it's very simple. And I try to say it to myself on a regular basis. My wife wrote me a note once, and I keep it. It's right here in my office. And it's 3 simple statements. You do enough, you have enough, you are enough. And that's very true. I believe that wholeheartedly of every human being. And if you want more out of life, you have every right to go and get it. And so that's the piece that we have to remember, is like, those things are true of everybody. And if you can believe that, then you can open up space for yourself to improve. But when you don't think those things, it doesn't matter how much money you have. For one, you're not going to use it for good reasons. You're probably going to use it to tear other people down or to put walls around yourself, and you're just not going to find satisfaction no matter how much money or stuff that you have.
For people who grew up with financial instability or lack of material wealth, how do you suggest they escape that scarcity mindset and feel safe spending or enjoying money, having material wellness?
Yeah, the first step, beyond anything else, like I said, is talk to somebody about it who doesn't believe about money the same way you do. If that's a therapist, great. There's a lot of opportunities out there. I wish there were more opportunities for people who are struggling, but not struggling so much that an intervention is required, right? There's the ends of the spectrum, the people who need therapy to save their lives, and then the people who are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on self-care so that they can get a little bit better. One of the goals of my life is to bring a little bit more to the middle, because a lot of people are just struggling to get by mentally, but not enough to where they're suicidal or they're struggling to the point where like an intervention is required. And so unfortunately, they just don't get as much attention, right? So for those people who are listening, who are like, I have limiting beliefs, I didn't come from a lot of money, and so I'm struggling to believe that money is a good thing. Talk to other people. If it's a therapist, great. There are resources out there. If it's just a mentor or an advisor or somebody, try to connect with somebody who has a better philosophy around money that can help you be okay with the fact that money is a good thing, right? I've had tons of mentors in my life that have helped me in one way or the other, and sometimes around money, because I had a lot of limiting beliefs around money. Wealthy people were horrible. Money um, was something that we didn't even talk about, to be honest, growing up. Like, I didn't know if we did or did not have money. I just knew we didn't go to McDonald's, right? We have food at home. That was always the answer. I used to hate that, and guess what? I tell my son all the time now. But ours is more around health, right? And obviously, yes, if you spend a lot of money on fast food, you will go broke. So there is a piece of like being fiscally responsible, but we talk to him about that. If we spend our money on this, we can't spend our money on the things that we like, which are experiences and time with family and those types of things. And Arthur Brooks, again, I quote him all the time because he studies happiness for a living. Kind of an interesting topic. And so he talks about there's 4 things that you should really spend your money on, and one of the big ones is experiences with your loved ones, because that's you're gonna remember that more than anything. That's the reason I started an event management company, Momentum Event Management, because I knew people wanted to pay for experiences. We love experiences. Another one is buying back your time, which is literally the name of a book that I did a book on the shelf about. It's called Buy Back Your Time from Dan Martell. Buy back your time so that you can spend time with your people you love. So again, it's pay somebody to mow your yard, but don't waste that time scrolling on Instagram, right? Spend it with the people you love. So those are 2 big things that you want to spend your money on. And there's 2 other ones. Go check him out, Arthur Brooks, on LinkedIn if you want to learn more, right? Shout out to him. He's an awesome guy. Love to have him on the podcast one day.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll make that happen. So that's what, like, knowing why you spend money is really important. But I think the biggest thing for anybody who's struggling with that is you got to change your mindset first, because it doesn't matter if you start to make a lot of money, you'll sabotage yourself because you don't believe you're worth it, or you don't believe it's a good thing. And so at some point you're going to go, whoa, this is horrible. This is bad. And the wheels are going to fall off. And so there's a lot of, give it the third one, because I actually couldn't remember the other 2, but also I won't tell the fourth because I want people to go check out Arthur Brooks. But the third one is give it to a good cause. So if you are making more money than you know what to do with, there are people who will take it off your hands, right? And if you're giving money to something you believe in, that money's not going to things you don't believe in, which are just, like money for the sake of money for people who maybe don't have the same intentions as you do. So if you have a strong purpose and a strong why, then you realize that getting that money and pouring it into that purpose is a positive thing. And so
Huge contribution.
absolutely. And so there's another thing that can really help you shift your mindset on money is I make money to fulfill my purpose. And that can make you a lot more apt to make a little bit more than what you need in order to be able to give it to those who maybe need it more.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great mindset shift to make.
Yeah.
You work with high achievers, obviously. How do you help people who've built wealth but still feel unfulfilled?
Yeah. What a great problem to have, right? Guess what I make them work on? Their mindset, right? Because again, it's I have all this wealth, but I'm still unfulfilled. Okay. Well, so the problem is you're still playing the same game that got you here, but the rules have changed. You hit that point. We talked about this earlier in the show, right? We hit that point where the you've hit the quality of life that you've needed. You've surpassed that. You have a little bit of a bigger house than you need, right? Your kids are out of the house now, so you don't even have you don't have as much time that you need to spend with them. So you keep pouring into the thing that you know brings you quote unquote validation, which is making more money, right? And if I told you, hey, why don't you quit your job that's paying you so much and go do something that's more meaningful to you? Well, your mindset would go, no, 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 because all of my validation comes from this job, because this job is the highest paying job I've ever had. And it's the thing that I've strove for so many years. How could I ever give up 30 years of striving for this job? It's like, because you've done it. You've reached that piece that you were trying to fulfill in yourself. But since there's no other answer for you, since there's no other path that you could possibly take, the only answer is take the promotion. Do the job, but do it more, right? That whole adage of more is better, which it's not. Better is better. And so that's the thing that I would tell them is okay, you have all the money. What's it for? What are you going to do with it? When you die and they're giving it away, where do you hope it goes to? Okay, so then why haven't you put it there yet? Why aren't you fulfilling what is meaningful to you now? You could just give that money away, or you could you could pour it into resources that help a company that does that work for a living. So a nonprofit that's doing the work that you have, or a social enterprise that's doing the work that you really hope is happening in the world. Don't wait until you're dead. There's a book called I think it's called Finish with Zero or End on Zero, something like that. But the idea of like the last check you should write, I think Lloyd talked about this in the podcast. The last check that you should write is the one for your burial services, and that check should bounce, right? Like that's like it should be. You should be dying with absolutely nothing to your name because you've given it all away or you've done something with it that's meaningful. And so again, it's the mindset shift for those individuals of, do you understand why you're working so hard for this thing? And is it really, truly bringing you happiness? Because until you understand what that means, it doesn't matter how much money you have. And so the very first step is, again, shifting that mindset. And for me, it starts with, typically what it does is we start with one of the 8 dimensions that they feel they're struggling with. So usually it's physical health or mental health, like they're stressed out to the gills, they're physically unhealthy, or their relationships are suffering. But really, to me, what it has centered into is the piece of my model, which is in the center, is directional well-being. That's the piece that's different from a lot of other models, is until you know your purpose and the values that you stand for, you don't really know what you're trying to do with your life. And so the answer is just more, because you don't know what better actually looks like. And so determining what that looks like, and then starting to ask, how does my material wellness fulfill that? How do my relationships fulfill that? How does my physical health fulfill that? And so you have to know what fulfillment looks like before you can start to make changes that are going to be meaningful. So the first step is kind of getting them out of the fire of, okay, let's get on an exercise program. Let's do some mindfulness practices. Let's maybe clean up your bank account. My clients, typically they can afford me, and so the material wellness or financial wellness isn't necessarily something that they struggle with. But some of my other individuals who may take courses or may just follow my content, that might be their problem. So the first thing is listen to the Lloyd Ross podcast or the umpteen other financial coaches I've had on the show, and do the steps. Pick one and do the things they talked about. I guarantee you 3 or 4 of them talked about $1,000 in your emergency fund. How many people can do that, right? But get out of the fire that you're in. And then once you get a little breathing room, you step into the discovery of your direction or your purpose and your values. And that's the piece that I think a lot of people struggle with. But once we do that, then we can look back outwards to the rest of the model and say, okay, how do I maximize my resources to improve all these other different dimensions of our well-being? And so that's where I would help them when they're struggling to really understand what's next.
Mhm. Mhm. We're getting close on time, but to start wrapping up here, what's one mindset shift you hope more people can make about money and happiness?
Money can buy happiness up to a certain point, but if you don't know what happiness means to you, that point will come and it will go, and you'll be left with thinking that money is the answer to happiness as opposed to a means to a certain level of happiness. And so if you're in a place where money is the only thing on your mind, it's really because you're in a survival mode of thinking you don't have enough because it's not providing you with the basic needs: food, water, shelter, space. If you've surpassed food, water, shelter, space as a need for your money, then you are still in survival mode, but it's because you still believe that money is going to make you better in some way, and it's usually in some sort of comparative way. So you have to do the work. Once you have food, water, shelter, space, if you can say, I have a bed to sleep in tonight, I have water and food available to me, I won't go hungry for the next several days, and I have a roof over my head. If you can say those three things, now it's time to do the work of trying to figure out what will actually bring you happiness. Because once you do that, then you'll know the point at which money is no longer the answer, and you have to find other means to find a better level of fulfillment. And so you have to know what that point is. And if you don't do the work, then the answer is always going to be more money. And that will lead to ruin, and has and will continue to, for a lot of people.
Mhm. What's one small daily habit or decision that helps you protect or improve your own quality of life once you have those three things?
I'm going to keep it to the material well-being conversation because there are a lot of things that I do, right? And guys, please recognize this. The reason I talk so much about money is because I struggle with it. I struggled with it for a number of years on limiting beliefs, but I did the work to recognize those things, and I still do the work. This is not a yes or no, an off or on. It's a process like everything else. Our lives are not projects that we complete. They're processes we live. And so the process that I use for understanding money, one of them is mindfulness. Mindfulness is a practice that it permeates all aspects of our life. Mindfulness about our body. Like I have a twinge going on right now in my shoulder, so I know that I've been sitting too long, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm mindful of that. I'm mindful of when I'm upset at a relationship. If my wife and I are arguing, then I'm trying to be mindful of what's really happening deeper down. And so mindfulness permeates all these different things because it just helps you become aware of your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions, and how to respond versus react to them. So mindfulness is helpful because then what happens is when you start to get anxious about money, you can start to ask yourself, what's really happening here? Why am I getting anxious? What happened over the last minute, week, day, year to get me into this state? And then you can start to act on that because now you have information, you have data to work on. So mindfulness is a huge practice for me, and that permeates all things, which is why I kind of start with that. But once you're a little bit more mindful and you can start to recognize those things, the other thing I highly suggest people do is create a budget and then check it out once in a while. My good friend Jim Fatu, who was on my podcast, so he was earlier on in the episodes, way back in the day when I was recording them out of Matchbox Studio, before I started to create my own podcast studio. One of his favorite quotes that he shared with me that I still use to this day, I used it with Lloyd when we first started talking, and he loved it. His quote about budgets are, "A budget is telling your money where to go instead of asking it where it went." And a lot of people hate budgets because they're so quote unquote restrictive. Well, what I think is restrictive is an empty bank account
Right.
because then you have absolutely no options. With a budget, you're telling your money where you want it to go because it's going to go somewhere. The question becomes, is it going where you want it to go? Is it going to the vacations that you want to go to? If it's going, is it going to the bills that are important? Is it going to the experiences that you want to have? Or is it just being spent on knickknacks and paddywhacks that you don't end up caring about? So those are the two things. And I have a budget. My wife actually takes care of the money because we learned long ago that I can't look at money too deeply too often because it does make me antsy. And so she takes care of the budget. And then we have a certain set of metrics that we put into what's called a scorecard. And that I quickly look at that and just see, are we on track or off track? And then that can help me understand how I need to adjust for the next week. So some of that is budget. So like what are the adjustable budget things, the miscellaneous items, the fast foods, the things like that, where I can go, oh, I spent way too much last week. I need to dial it back. But having those regular intervals that you can look, it's the same as weighing in, right? Like if you don't weigh in, your weight's going to go somewhere. You would prefer to know that it's staying the same or going down if you're trying to lose weight. So hiding from it doesn't make it any better. It just makes you chronically stressed out all the time instead of stressed out in the moment where you go, okay, that's not the number I want. What am I going to do about it? And so the mindfulness piece, again, very, very important that we understand why we get anxious or upset about our money. And then the mindset around money and what it does for us and better understanding it are vital. We can't, that's where I definitely recommend people start. And then having a tool that lets us track on a regular basis. I do it once a week. Some people can get away with once a month. It kind of just depends on your habits and what you're trying to do. If you're really trying to focus on it, just like weighing in, then you need to do it more often so you have a better trend line, as opposed to if you do it every 6 months. Oh crap, I didn't do very well this last 6 months. Well, you're not going to be able to change much then, right? It's the same as tracking your weight. Like, oh, well, I gained 10 pounds over the last 6 months. Well, you could have done something about it if you had tracked it more regularly. But hiding from it will definitely not help you. And so you have to take that responsibility to do something. So mindset, regular budget tracking, it doesn't have to be complicated. You can do the app if you really want to. We do a Google Doc or a Google Sheet that just makes it easier for us. And then just pay attention to it. And then Lloyd gave some really good recommendations. When he coaches people, he does a 90-day kind of boot camp where he just literally, like, everything's on the table, he says, right? Makeup, insurance, people have sold their houses and their cars, like, get out of the credit card debt, all that kind of stuff. There's so many different little things you can do with your money to really get out of the hole that you find yourself in. But you got to know where you're at to know where you're going. And so those are the things that I would really recommend. And then again, finding a mentor, finding somebody who's doing fairly well. Prove to them that you're willing to work on it. You can't just be like, hey, fix me. And then, 2 weeks later, you're like, well, I didn't actually do anything you said. Well, nobody's going to pour into a poor investment if they know how to do finances well. So you got to prove to them that you're willing to change, but you got to prove that to yourself first.
Yeah. Well, this was a great conversation. I learned a lot about how, money can buy happiness, but it all depends on, how you handle it, how intentional you are with it, and how you view it in your overall life. So, I appreciate it. Do you have any last final thoughts to say?
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more. You listen to the Lloyd Ross podcast. Tell me a little bit more about kind of what was your takeaway or your aha moment after listening to that as a younger,
Yeah.
aspiring, already doing a good job of coaching yourself. What kind of struck out to you?
The real importance of having a purpose, rather than, because yes, money can get you to a comfortable state, but it is not going to fulfill you for the rest of your life. And so, really just the basic understanding that having enough money for food, water, shelter, space is going to help you to move in the direction that you want to go and where you want to contribute and connect with people. And that's really what's going to help you feel more fulfilled in your life, I'd say.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a piece of the bigger picture conversation, right? I talk a lot about meaning. I'm constantly trying to help people find meaning in their life and trying to figure out what is this all for, right? And I have thoughts on it. I don't have answers. I have thoughts. But one of the things that I have found is that the people who really truly feel like they have a meaning in life, they're working towards something. And part of working towards something is you measure, you track whether or not you're succeeding or growing in that direction, right? And so humans want to strive. There's a reason we literally hopped on logs that were tied together and sailed across the frickin' ocean, right? Just because what's over there? I don't know. Let's go find out.
Sure.
Will we die? Probably, but why wouldn't we? Right? We're always striving for something. And the more comfortable our life gets, the less we have to strive, we have found is not necessarily making us happier or more fulfilled. And so when it comes to this idea of money, again, when we get to a comfortable place, we don't necessarily feel like we've quote unquote made it because we don't have a valiant effort to put towards something meaningful to us. And so it's this idea, I've seen it time and again, people who work their asses off to retire at 65 and die at 67. because they thought, I've worked all my life, so now I'm just going to sit back and relax. And then they get miserable. They get socially deprived. They get lonely. They get physically inactive and unhealthy. And they literally lose a reason for living. And so we need something to work towards. And to a certain degree, for a certain bit, money is a piece of that, because money is a representation of the value we bring to the world, right? Society gives us money because we give something to society. And there's a lot of conversations, which we don't have time in the next 6 minutes to really unpack, but there's a lot of conversations around like, well, I'm not compensated enough. Well, then you're allowing society to you are telling society, I'm okay with this because you're willing to accept it for the amount of money that you're given. Well, then, but I can't just up and quit my job. Can you not? What, like, there's a give and take to this. There's controllables and there's uncontrollables. There's being grateful for what you have, and then they're saying, if I'm worth more, I need to go out and find what I'm worth. And so there's a whole litany of conversation around that. And I hope people don't take that one little sound bit and go, well, you don't understand. Because I do, to a large degree, and there are a lot of people who have gone through that process. But I think a big part of this entire conversation is just really understanding that money is the value you give to the world, and they give you money in return for that exchange of time for dollars. And at a certain point, you're going to have all that you need in terms of money, monetary value, to be able to live a comfortable life. And then the question then has to become, now, what am I going to do with this comfortable life? What am I going to do with this ability that I've been given? Like, I'm sitting here talking to you across the way virtually in this very comfortable space, right? I could very easily just chill out. I joke with my wife all the time because she goes and does her thing with our son, and I'm doing here, and she'll be like, "Oh, what are you up to today?" I'll be like, nothing. I'm just gonna eat Cheetos on a beanbag, probably play video games, just chill out. Because I just laugh, because it's funny, but I could very easily. A lot of people do that, and then they get upset because they're not finding any meaning in their life and fulfillment. And it's like, well, you got to be grateful for what you have, and then ask yourself, what are you going to do to make the world a better place and bring value to it? And that value doesn't have to be monetarily. There are a lot of people whose vocation, so vocational well-being is another one. That's your calling. It's not what you do for money. It's what you do for a calling. Some people are fortuitous enough, myself included. You're also building your life around this. Some people get to do what they do for a living and what they do for money. They put those two things together. Some people do what they do as a job, 9 to 5, to make money, to go and volunteer and do things that for a calling. Monks get handed donations, right? They give their food given away for free, and they do what their purpose in life is, off the kindness of other people's hearts, right? Not all monks, but that's just an example. Mother Teresa, right? Like, she had a calling. I doubt she was worried too much about how much she was getting paid to do it, right? And so your vocation is different than what you do for money. They could be the same thing, but not always. And so it's really important that we recognize, like, at a certain point, money will buy happiness, and then happiness has to take off from there. Are you using your money to give yourself opportunities for more happiness, to spend time with your family, to do things that matter, to give to a good cause? And if you don't figure that out, it will not continue to buy you happiness.
Well said.
Yeah, well, it's one of the reasons I love AMA shows. We get to talk about cool stuff. So, Kristin, tell us a little bit more. The next episode, what day is it? I think I got it pulled up.
7th.
May
May
15th?
7th. Oh,
May what?
May 7th?
May 7th? Yep, that's, nope, May 7th is
Today's
podcast.
well,
May 14th.
14th.
May 14th.
Yes,
So,
the
so many
second
shows,
and
so many cool
fourth
things happening.
Wednesday.
Yes, absolutely. So, actually, podcast coming out on May 8th. So, just a reminder to everybody, our AMA shows come out on the second and fourth Thursday of every week. of every month. Silly. We do the live show today on Wednesday, and then we release it to Spotify and all the things on Thursday. Then the podcast comes out every Thursday, the first and the third week of the month. And so our next podcast, which is in 2 weeks, the fifth week is always weird, right? We all try to figure out what to do with that fifth week. But the first week of May, so May 8th, we have a podcast coming out from Brandon Knoll, who is the director of Plug and Play for Indiana. And Plug and Play is a venture capitalist firm that gives out millions of dollars. But he talks about his story about the time he was sitting at the bar. He was on the cover of a financial magazine. He was slated to go work for Goldman Sachs. He was dealing with, I think he said, $300 million worth of investments. And he sits at a bar. He looks to his left and to his right, and he sees a bunch of old guys without wedding rings. And he's going, is this really what I want my life to be? And so it was just a phenomenal story about very similar to what we're talking about here, of really defining what success looks like and meaning, and asking himself. And so now he's the director of Plug and Play. He's crushing it. He's looking for the next, or the unicorn from Indiana that's going to be $1 billion valuation for a startup company. Super excited to be a part of that. So the podcast is coming out 2 weeks from now, May 8th, and then we have our AMA show. And what are we talking about on the 14th?
All about stress. And yeah,
Stress.
useful, not useful stress, how it influences your performance, your life, all the things.
I love it. And a little hot tip here, a little sneak peek. If you're not stressing in some way, you're not building a fulfilling life. No question about it. It's not a question of if we're stressing. It's a question of if we're stressing the right way. And then to get rid of the stresses that are actually not serving us. So the podcast with Torkel Farrow that's coming out soon. He wrote the book, The Pulse Cure. So that's another podcast coming out. He'll talk a little bit more about stress in that regard. That'll actually come out after the stress show. So super excited to have that come out. But you're going to stress, but are you stressing the right way? It'll be interesting.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Kristin, as always, phenomenal conversation. Great questions. Great question.